All right, so I want to talk to you guys about perspective, refraction, lensing, miraging, compression, and a little something called the horizon gap. And we're going to talk about information loss due to perspective and how proximity to a tangible surface or compressed angles will obscure objects. And they'll obscure them bottom first or bottom up on a flat plane. Because everybody wants to tell me how things disappear in the horizon from the bottom up, like boats on the ocean, and how that has to be due to Earth curvature. I'm gonna shut you all up once and for all.
It generally centers around the question as to why boats disappear from the bottom up over long distances. Since this is probably the most popular argument in favor of the globe propagandists will not let it go, even if it is stupid. As you can see here, so long as the water is very calm and there is no inferior mirage, you can see the clear evidence of our flat Earth. This cruise ship in this video, which should be entirely hidden by the globe curvature, is much further away than the video used by Mr. McKeegan, and the camera is even lower at only 2 feet off of the water. Essentially, as I have discussed before, there are 3 primary ways the globe propagandists trick their non-discerning audience with the claim that boats disappear over the alleged curvature. First, globe propagandists use the fact that small obstructions between you and a distant object, like waves, swells, and tides, can cause boats and distant buildings to disappear from the bottom up. Globe proponents falsely call these obstructions curvature, and will deny the fact that small objects in the foreground can obstruct distant objects along the horizon. Fortunately,
do you get it? Small objects in the foreground can obstruct distant objects on the horizon.
In the video you're about to see, Life is Short has an awesome segment that details how the smallest obstructions can become large obstructions, to the point that for a 6-foot observer, a 3-foot wave a quarter mile away can obstruct a 250-foot tall cruise ship 20 miles away. This actual footage from Wide Awake further confirms Life is Short's argument. The second method of deception globe propagandists use is taking a long-distance object that is being obstructed by an inferior mirage and deceptively referring to that opaque inferior mirage obstruction as curvature.
Okay, so number 2, inferior mirage, miraging. This is a phenomenon that we need to account for when we engage in this discussion.
That's a favorite one used by many propagandists, including Red's Rhetoric, Walter Bislin, McWest, and Soundly. You'll see Mr. McKeegan employ the same pathetic method of deception in the videos you're about to see. What shocks me the most is that their subscribers fail to see such obvious lies. The third method of deception, which is beyond the discussion here, is taking long-distance images that are compressed, like these apartments here, and referring to that compression as curvature.
Compression. Compression's another thing we're going to talk about here. We're talking about how perspective works. We're talking about the way optics work in this world. Because when we view things, objects behave in a very particular way, depending on a number of circumstances. These circumstances need to be accounted for in the discussion, because people who like to defend their globe and their globe model use sweeping generalizations along with a number of logical fallacies to try to explain their points. But under scrutiny, they fall apart because it's about perception.
Actually, it was a longer observational video of a sailboat supposedly disappearing behind the curvature. This is a shortened version, and this video is still listed by Red's Rhetoric as proof of the curvature. I remember this video well because it had a huge psychological impact on me, as the globe proponents were very excited about it. According to them, this observational video should have ended the flat Earth debate. I actually thought the globe proponents were right at first glance, but I watched the video carefully, and I noticed something was wrong with the claim, as the far distant birds were mirroring themselves and disappearing higher than what appeared to be the horizon.
You see what happened, how the bird mirrored itself?
And disappearing higher than what...
See it? You'll see maybe like the left third of the screen at the watermark You watch the bird come up and it mirrors itself. What I and this gentleman and others are trying to point out is when you look out and you see things disappear in the distance, it's a very complex process that involves multiple things, all based on perspective and optics. And it's nothing to do with physical curvature. It's this feature, this phenomenon, this fata morgana. It's complex because when you're using telephoto lenses, especially when you're zooming in, there are certain features that evidence the things that are being discussed here. One of them is mirroring, miraging, and lensing.
Than what appeared to be the horizon line.
Now here I put a little arrow, and if you watch carefully, right at that line, you will see clearly the waves of water as they run by the boat, and you can see the reflection of the left sail in the water. That's not the boat. That is a reflection. Just like in this image here of the sunset, that is not the sun melting into the water. That is the actual water. Kind of reminds you of this image here. This gentleman walking on a mirage street, and obviously the bottom of his body has been eaten up. And that is what's happening on the ocean when we look at boats. The bottom of the boat has been eaten up. Here you can look underneath that right sail. There's nothing there, whereas the actual boat, which I superimposed, had different sections of the boat there.
Fascinating, but mirages swallow distant objects from the bottom up. The bottom of the boat did not go over any imaginary curvature. Without question, the bottom of the boat disappeared into a mirage, and the rest of the boat faded into the atmosphere. It's not even debatable, as you can clearly see the mirage line.
Right. You see it? The boat is basically evidencing miraging. And we're going to talk about something called a horizon gap soon. Because believe it or not, even without the phenomena of miraging, lensing, compression, there seems to be a quote-unquote horizon gap when we talk about perspective.
Globe propagandists still use mirages as proof of the curvature. Globe propagandists still use mirages as proof of the curvature. Now, this is another issue that still bugs me, because people keep sending this to me as proof of the curvature. This is Soundly's famous Lake Pontchartrain Earth curvature video. He still has it up, and he still proclaims that this is actual footage of the elusive Earth's curvature.
All right, so this is one of the very frequent things that globe propagandists will use to try to show that there's Earth curvature. They take this one isolated image of this Lake Pontchartrain, it's called, and they'll show this in isolation, without explanation, without repeating it. Basically, it's images like this that give people the confirmation bias that they're looking for. When people want to make people like me look silly and others like me, they'll point to things like this. Most normies, when they encounter an image like this, they'll stop their search because in their minds, emotionally, they've received enough information for them to confirm their pre-indoctrinated belief. And they'll leave it. And it's a good thing there's people out here doing this work to basically show what the truth is.
The globe liars always make the claim that we flat earthers don't believe in refraction. I have spent many hours filming long distances. We flat earthers most certainly believe in refraction. And guess what? This is what refraction looks like. Refraction takes what is visible within your line of sight and it distorts, it stretches, it compresses, it mirages, and it obscures your vision. But refraction is certainly not a vision enhancer that enables us to magically see around giant bulges of the Earth. But let's get back to the Pontchartrain curvature. You can see why they won't let go of this lie, because it's pretty convincing for the ignorant and the unobservant. You know, the target audience of the Globe cult channels. But here's an older video from Phuket Word, but it's absolutely perfect, as he fully demonstrates to any honest, objective, thinking person that Soundly's imaginary Pontchartrain curvature is nothing but a mirage, deceptively relabeled as Earth curvature. Look at the comparison side by side. It's unmistakable. There is no curvature at Pontchartrain. That's an obvious effect of light bending. You know, actual refraction. Do these
Actual refraction. And that's what they do. See, they claim refraction is the opposite. They say, well, instead of distorting, bending, compressing, miraging, they try to claim that refraction actually takes things that are obstructed physically and magically bends them back right into line of sight with perfect clarity. Again, another inversion by these tricksters.
Fortunately, a flat earther did go out and filmed Pontchartrain with a P900 and proved the Earth is flat. What I really like is the comparison on Bislin's website that shows what the flat Earth and the globe Earth are supposed to look like when modeled out. Do I even need to ask which one represents reality? Why hasn't Bislin linked to this very flat Pontchartrain video, even out of intellectual honesty? What's even more ridiculous?
Right. And that's what he just said, intellectual honesty. And that's what's lacking in most discourse these days from anyone defending this religion of scientism. They're lacking intellectual honesty. They base all of their models, they base all of their calculations off of presuppositions. When you investigate their ideology and their theories, you find that the foundations are flimsy at best, and they're usually completely made up. They don't hold up to scrutiny, not at all. But in discourse with these individuals, they often evidence intellectual dishonesty.
More ridiculous is the fact that these liars claim that this flat Earth footage that you're watching is actually refraction, magically removing the Earth bulge without a trace and lifting all of the distant transmission lines to appear as though the Earth is flat. Really? To the honest observer, which video is evincing the telltale signs of refraction? This one, where you can see the actual miraging and bending of the light, or this one, where you can even see the structures on the other side of Pontchartrain displaying a true flat Earth?
When you can even see the structures on the other side of Lake Pontchartrain. You can see it. You can see the other side there in the picture on the bottom left. You can see the shoreline. It's fascinating. That's what I keep saying. This isn't new information. This isn't hard information. And the information is out there. It's present. That's why I'm so vocal on this topic. Is because I'm realizing it's not about the information. It's about the suppression of this information. It's about censorship. And again, it's about dishonesty. Intellectual dishonesty, but at this point, it's more like spiritual dishonesty.
Seriously? The flat Earth truth is painfully obvious.
Hello again, everyone. Hope you're doing well, and thanks for joining us for another video.
All right, so this is an anti-flat earther. You can see his globe in the back.
Now, for centuries, it's been an established fact that the reason ships sailing out to sea disappear from the bottom up is due to the curvature of Earth blocking our line of sight. Disappear from the bottom up is due to the curvature of Earth.
Right out the gate, he shows us the effects of an inferior mirage and calls it Earth curve instead. Not a good start, Dave.
Disappear from the bottom up is due to the curvature of Earth.
Demonstrate how that lens bends light waves to create a mirage. Ed brings in a helicopter.
Okay, come toward us at maybe 10 knots at 5 feet ATL if you can, over.
Just now, the ground is much warmer than the air above it. This creates a gradient of hot to cold air. And since cold air is denser or heavier than warm air, the two air masses create distinct layers.
You see what he's talking about? Air temperature. The warmer air and the cold air create two distinct density layers. And you get this miraging. Look at the helicopter in the distance here. There's a complete mirror image of it underneath. And you'll see what happens as it goes to land.
Those layers act like a lens, bending and distorting our familiar reality. The result is a classic mirage, where objects appear below their actual position.
As the helicopter lands, you see its landing gear begin to vanish into the mirage. This is only one of a few different ways bottom-first obstruction occurs on our flat Earth.
Sequence is one of my favorite sequences with mirages. You can see it in the distance. You don't know what that is. It looks like a spaceship coming at you. Yeah. It's a black blob, and this is on a highway in New Mexico. You have no idea what it is, and slowly it emerges. It still looks like a spaceship right there.
Yeah. It's floating in the air.
It's floating in the air. It seems to be floating in the air. And when we get up here, you see it. It's a car with two trucks behind it.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? That just shows that your eyes can deceive you so much with this sort of stuff.
Well, it's not your eyes that are deceiving you. Your eyes aren't deceiving anything. What it is the lens of the air between the object and what you're seeing. That's the.
It's not your eyes that are deceiving you. It's the lens created by the air between you and the object. That's the biggest thing with these anti-flat earthers and these globe proponents, is that they're consistently disregarding optics. So what they do is they hijack optics. They hijack how we see this world. And they try to explain the world through optics. Meaning to say, because of optics, things disappear along a horizon. Provably, we have the technology. It's proven. And they still will not relent, because the entire globe model was based on the hijacking of optics, plain and simple.
That's the deception.
However, flat earthers obviously have to offer a different explanation, and the reason that I've seen most commonly given is due to the Rayleigh criterion, sometimes phrased along the lines of it's perspective or it's a limit to our vision, which it's not. So in this video, I'm going to try and break down as simply as possible to show why. The problem with all of this is that objects disappearing due to being unresolvable don't disappear from the bottom up like flat earthers claim.
Oftentimes when angular resolution is up for debate, globe proponents along with some flat earth proponents will fail to mention the effects of visible surfaces on your perspective. Any visible flaw, such as land and water, wall or ceiling, will compress your visual angles when looking along it, depending on the distance from the surface.
All right, you need to pay attention to this. Any visible floor, such as land or water, wall or ceiling, will compress your visual angles when looking along it, depending on the distance from the surface. This is key here.
When there is no visible surface, such as looking up at the sky, your visual angles remain open.
When there's no visual surface, such as looking up at the sky, your visual angles remain open. This is so simple, but yet so beautiful.
This all plays a huge role in how far we can actually see. We will go into further detail soon, but let's continue.
We can't see a 6-foot object 3 miles away, so therefore we can't see the bottom 6 foot of any object 3 miles away. But his reason for that was that it had to be either due to perspective or due to the globe horizon. But it can't be both. But objects can't appear to both get smaller and smaller as they get further away, but then also be blocked by the physical curvature of Earth.
Brian was partially right in saying that Earth curve calculators do not take any part of perspective into account, but of course angular resolution will always apply, no matter the shape of any surface you're on. Dave is simply taking advantage of a poorly constructed argument that failed to mention the proximity of a viewer to that of a surface.
That failed to mention the proximity of a viewer to that of the surface. That is key here. And now we're going to get into the main course, because this is the key part of it.
And it can't be that we can't resolve the bottom 6 foot of objects 3 miles away because of limits to our vision, because that would then mean that we couldn't resolve the bottom 6 foot of any object that's 3 miles away. And yet we can resolve the bottom 6 foot of a plane when it's 3 miles away, no problem. We don't just see half a plane suddenly cut off.
That's because there is no ground to compress your bottom visual angle while looking at objects in the sky. It's not until they reach your visual horizon that things will be cut off from your view. It's time you learn this, Dave.
Thank you. So he makes a goofy argument that says, well, you can see a plane in the sky that's over 3 miles away and it's not cut off. again, intellectually dishonest, as the presenter points out. That's because there is no ground to compress your bottom visual angle while looking at the object in the sky. It's not until they reach your visual horizon that things will be cut off. Your visual horizon, which is 50% of your field of view. I don't want to get upset. I don't want to get upset. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. They just don't know. They've been indoctrinated since the day they were born. They're egotistical. They want to be right. They're not really interested in the truth. They just want to be right. So then they're intellectually dishonest. Okay, note to self. They're emotionally stunted like children, and they've been rewarded for their compliance with deception. Okay, I'm grounded. I'm back. I'm back now. I'm back. All right. Thank you. Let's continue.
So this is across a lake nearby, which on a perfectly clear day, decent weather, and it's about 410 feet across to the other side, where there'll be a piece of debris that you will see here in a minute. So I'll go ahead and play. So I'm lowering my iPhone from about a 2-foot height down to just where the...
All right, so I'm not playing this for shits and giggles. This is information that is vitally important, more than you know. If the average plebe understood the information that I right now and these gentlemen who took the time to make this presentation are presenting, if you truly understood what this information meant, you wouldn't be so cavalier with it. They know not what they do. Pay attention.
Where the water ripples, and that's just when the casing on the iPhone just barely touches the water. Right there. So the camera is inverted. It ends up being about a ½ inch above the water. This is zoomed in. You can see the white piece of debris by the bench to the lower left of the bench.
There's the debris right where my arrow is. He's going to show you that as he lowers his camera down towards the water level, at some point close to the water, that debris will disappear. Get it? It doesn't disappear because he plunges it into the water. No. It disappears even though he's above the water. He's trying to make a point here. And this goes back to the point I was trying to make about horizon gap. Irrespective of miraging, refraction, lensing, and compression, this is a phenomenon because when information gets compressed due to the exponential growth associated with perspective, you lose resolution. God, I wish you guys could understand this, some of you. I truly do. This is so sad. This is because what I'm understanding now is the deliberate deception shown throughout academia, throughout the education system, and you people just keep sending your kids to these schools. You've submitted yourself over to tyranny and the illegitimate authority of this government, and it's sad and it's deplorable.
Bench across the way. So you'll see there, it's gone, and I haven't even touched the water yet. There, I've touched the water, and it's back again. So I decided to put some measurements to this, which we'll discuss in a minute. I also want you to note that piece of white debris right there in the center of the frame that is very nearby, around 15 feet away, and how that close that gets to the horizon as we lower our phone down. So these are some still shots from what I just showed. So again, distance is 410 feet, and that near field debris is the red arrow in the left picture there in the low aspect of the frame. And then as I, at about a 2-foot observer height, and then at about a 0.5-inch observer height, you can see how high in the field that piece of debris dot near the purple mirror inflection point or horizon line of this image. So again, keep in mind that if this is, let's say it's 10 to 15 feet away, and the distance between myself and the debris on the other side is 410 feet, that I am cramming 400 feet of information between the red tip of that arrow and the purple horizon line.
I'm cramming 400 feet of information between the red tip of the arrow and here. See what happens when he lowers it? So this is 2 feet. When he lowers it to just 0.5 inches, just half an inch, like he said, all that information from this visual field, this is the crux of what he's trying to say. All of this information where you see my cursor gets compressed into this little sliver because this debris moves up here because of the exponential nature of perspective. This is why you lose things in the horizon. This is very simple. Why don't they teach this in school? Why are they still teaching first graders that boats go over the horizon? Still to this day, it's a lie. It's just a lie. They're lying to you all. They're lying to your kids. And we have a situation where the adults in this society are so infantilized that they don't even care anymore that they're being lied to. There is no longer a love of truth. We are truly in a state of decay.
A lot of information. And so what ends up happening is that your horizon shortens along the lower field, and whatever is there disappears into the essentially a gap that's formed. So again, this is just a typical photo with an iPhone camera about 6 feet off the water. And I am basically looking at a cresting wave, which you can see in the zoomed out photo. You don't even need to be zoomed in. You can see the little white dot that the arrow is pointing to in the middle of the frame. And then zoomed in, you can see it a little bit better. But how far is that cresting wave, do you think? So when you analyze this, you find that it's essentially about a half mile away. Each halving of a frame puts twice the amount of information in the next halving. So
each halving of a frame puts twice the amount of information in the next frame. Do you see how he has this laid out?
So you can look at the 50% numbers on the side. You can look at the amount of information that I'm cramming into each subsection. And again, the proof of this you can find when I analyze the hallway footage. And you find that in, again, the lower 1/4 of the image, I have 9 feet, and then it goes 18 feet, 36 feet, 72 feet, and it doubles each time. And by the time you get to the arrow point, it's only about a half mile, which means that if I'm a 6-foot observer and I see 3 miles, then I'm cramming 2.5 miles between the very top black line and the purple line horizon.
Get it right here where my cursor is. From there to there is 2.5 miles of visual information that gets crammed in to that visual field. This is why things become unresolvable in the distance. Do you all right, I need to calm down again. This information right here could wake the whole world up, and they're suppressing it. They're shadow banning this information. This presentation right here could wake the world up if they just showed it on the news. If they just presented it in school. They're lying to you, everybody. You're living in a reality that was made up for you. You guys just want to go along like everything's fine, footloose and fancy free. You enjoy the delusion. You enjoy your privileges and benefits because they suit you. Guess what? There'll be a time where they no longer suit you. The devil always comes for his due, and that time's coming.
Which is quite a lot of information to be crammed in such a small space. So I'm not going to go through this in too much detail. I want this to be short. Just remember that as you lower your eye height, you're cramming more and more information into a smaller space, and it gets lost.
As you lower your eye height, you're cramming more and more information into a smaller space, and it gets lost.
So, but it remains 50% of your vision. So the floor is still 50%, even though you're not seeing as far along the floor. So what happens to that information in the distance? It disappears essentially into this, what I'll term, I guess, a horizon gap.
It disappears into what he's calling a horizon gap.
And again, more information on this you can find on my channel or with the discussion with Jeranism. Same thing here. Again, at different heights, you can see how I'm compressing different information. So when I'm 8 foot tall, the ceiling is getting compressed. And as I get down to 1 foot tall, or 0 feet, or essentially half a centimeter off, the floor is getting compressed. And this is just an aspect of how our vision works. It has nothing to do with curvature. So these spacings, again, just to reiterate, they are spacings along regular intervals that were measured. And you can see how that information changes as I alter my height to them. More and more information gets compressed into smaller spaces. And this is just taking them away from the photos to analyze them. And then putting kind of a side-on view, which again doesn't really exist, but just allows you to kind of conceptualize things a little bit easier. And some more math on how the floor tiles worked, the spacing along the lights, and how all the mathematics works out essentially to give us this halving phenomenon between each iteration of a frame. And this is at different heights, and again, how you see different aspects within each halving of an image, and how this phenomenon might allow for bottom first disappearance as the horizon along the lower field shortens, and we do not see as far along it. And what ends up happening is we form this gap of sorts in our vision. If we are close to the ceiling, let's say, and it were flat, we would have a gap along the ceiling, and we wouldn't see as far along the ceiling, but we would see as further along the floor. And the vice versa occurs when we are closer to the floor than we are to the ceiling. And my point with this is that we are always, when we are outdoors, closer to the floor than we are to the ceiling. So as I lower myself in this perspective here, and I have a light visible across about 400 feet or so, or 500 feet of distance along a hallway, you can see that the light is visible at first, and then as I lower myself, how perspective changes, and how at a certain point the light is no longer visible. And these are just everyday examples you can do on your own. So if we change our...
you see how when he got low enough, the light, he had a flashlight. The light becomes no longer visible. Was the floor, was the perfectly level, horizontal floor obstructing the light? Of course not. This is just how perspective works. And again, even more to the point, you don't even need the phenomenon of refraction, lensing, miraging to have this. There appears to be a horizon gap. It's just plain and simple. When you approach the horizon, because of the halving that he talked about, and the exponential way in which perspective works due to convergence to a focal point, there's too much information in your particular field of view to be resolved. Therefore, it becomes opaque. It's plain and simple. There's a vanishing point because it becomes unresolvable. There's too much visual information crammed in to that small field. When you approach your eye line, which is the 50% mark of your field of view.
If we go from a hallway into an outdoor setting and we just change our horizon distance, there's no reason why this isn't a different aspect of perspective. It's the same exact thing. We're just outdoors. And instead of looking at a flashlight, we are now looking at a cruise ship or a boat or something else going over what we believe is a physical horizon, but it's nothing more than an apparent position of our vision and how our vision works along flat surfaces. So same thing again, I'm in here in a Walmart and then no light is visible. I'm along the floor. So there's no reason to believe why this aspect of vision would change if I were to remove the walls and the ceiling of this Walmart and extend this floor for miles and miles, and I were just to stand up. It would be the same exact phenomenon, but just occur further and further away. There's no reason to believe that this is curvature. So I just do that here. I remove the walls and the ceiling. I'm still on the floor, and then I extend my floor, let's say, to become some crops or something like that. It doesn't matter. And now I'm just looking at a tractor going off into the distance, and it disappears as well. So here's the footage with some more exact measurements, and this is just later in the day. And so you can see kind of what occurs along this flat surface. And I'm calling it flat because by globe standards, this is a flat surface. Essentially, no bulge is apparent across 400 feet, but yet we have an issue here. So please watch.
Okay, here we are at the lake. It's a nice clear night, perfectly still waters. I'll put the coordinates on Google for where exactly I am across this lake, and the distance of the light height, the distance of the light height, and the iPhone height. Bye.
So here we are. We're taking it at 2.5 inches just to be in the middle of the light. Here's the setup. And there I'm just barely touching the ground, touching the water. You can see the ripples just starting as the iPhone case just touches the water. There's no immersion of the camera or anything underwater.
And there goes the light.
It is zoomed in a still shot.
There it goes.
Missing now. Slow motion.
And by the way, this is the same thing for people say, well, how does the sun set on a flat earth? It's the same thing. It just moves off. When it reaches a certain distance, it just merges into the horizon. Plain and simple.
You can see the autofocusing occurring. And I stopped it here so you can see kind of that there appears to be basically a hard line on this frame.
There's a clear cutoff from the bottom up, and it's very abrupt.
Again, just some more slow motion of the other times that I went up and down. So these were the distances. So again, 0.1 to 0.2. I basically sat there for about 2 or 3 minutes and allowed the positioning system to identify where I was before I pinpointed each point. And that's very accurate for at least where I was. So could it be a few feet off one way or another? Sure. But roughly it's about 400 feet at least. Again, you can see the measurement of my iPhone case to the center of the camera, and it is about ½ inch. And you can see that I took the 2.5 inches for the height of the light, which was being generous. I didn't do the top of the light, which the whole light disappears, but I'm just going to do the middle of the light. And so some still shots again. As I'm about 1.5 feet off the water, you can still clearly see the light, and you can see a little bit of reflection on the water with the light, but the light is still visible. And then as I am 0.5 inches off, there is clearly no light visible whatsoever. And then in the bottom of I just took some still shots of how that, when it was autofocusing, and you can see the halo, and how that halo definitely appears to be cut off bottom first. So what should we be seeing if we were to be living on a globe? If this phenomenon right here is because this water is curved, and curved water is what obstructs our vision of things beyond a horizon, a physical horizon, then what should we be seeing? Well, the short answer is that we should be seeing this entire light. There should be no loss. And so the drop essentially should be about 0.004 feet, or about 0.048 inches, or which comes out to about 1.22 millimeters. And if you know how big a millimeter is, that's extremely small. And we are definitely far more than 1.22 millimeters with that light above the water. Furthermore, my horizon distance should be about 1,314 feet, which is well beyond the 400 feet that we were at. So by all accounts, we should be seeing this entire light the whole time.
Of course, you should be seeing the whole light the whole time, obviously. But he just basically said there was, don't, you know, are you going to really try to tell me that the water's curving over that short amount of distance? He said it was like a millimeter or two, based on their dumb calculations of curvature. I love the people who want to say, "Whoa, but Z, I believe in science, so you know I'm not really down with your flat Earth belief." It's like, well, this is real science right here. Just because they're not presenting it to you, just because they're hiding this information, doesn't make it any less true. Everybody.
Really say that this wasn't a refraction phenomenon. If you were to go back and look here, at these conditions. This is across 400 feet. It's crystal clear. The water is not moving whatsoever. And the temperature is roughly the same between the water and the outside air. It was a fairly warm night.
Okay. Right. So as he said, no refraction. This is just pure convergence. This is pure perspective. This seems to be regardless of miraging, mirroring, refraction. Those things all play a part, especially when we're looking out miles and miles. But he's looking about 410 feet here. And what he's doing so beautifully is he's showing you that even taking away those things like refraction and atmospheric effects, things seem to disappear at the horizon just due to the angular size and the information that's compressed into a particular field of view, plain and simple.
I'm not too concerned that refraction would play almost any role in this whatsoever. So Earth is now 1/4 the size it should be, and it ends up being smaller than the moon, using the rationale that this is a physical curvature phenomenon. So you can believe that, or you can believe something else is responsible for this bottom up first, or this bottom first disappearance phenomenon. So is information loss an everyday aspect of our visual horizons? Why is this occurring? Is it secondary to tangible surfaces? In other words, to our proximity to a tangible surface limits the amount of information that we're being allowed to process. So I just want you to focus on that. It may not be that the bottom of the objects disappear from being too small to see, but rather that the ground can only extend so far when we are close. Not so much the object itself. Can't see that far along the ground, but it still occupies 50% of your vision.
So we have seen how mirages, and how your proximity to a surface or compressed angles will obscure objects, bottom first on a flat plane, even if it were perfectly flat. Another way objects can become obscured bottom first on a flat plane is simply due to foreground objects, such as uneven ground, grass, waves, swells, etc.
So because perspective ascends quickly and then tapers, an obstruction nearby would completely obscure the bottom of an object far away. Using similar triangles, and assuming we are at the portion of vision where...
What he's talking about now is how objects in the foreground that are relatively small can obscure relatively large objects in the distance, using the same principles he's been explaining this whole time.
Where this perspective plateau occurs, again, typically beyond 20 feet or so, we see that if there were an obstruction 30 feet away, near that second golf ball, or just 6 millimeters above the eye line, it would be enough to obscure the entire golf ball 130 feet away. So we can have summarized this effect by stating small obstructions in the foreground obstruct distant objects. So if that doesn't make sense, maybe it will here if I explain the diagram. So the red line from the eye to the purple line is, again, going to have a rapid ascent rate, an exponential ascent rate. And so we know that objects, even though they encroach upon that purple line, they don't actually start to set for quite a bit distance away. So that means that there's essentially a plateau or a table of an area or distance across which an obstruction along that point would completely obscure the object further down the road because its angular size is going to get smaller. And so
because its angular size is going to get smaller. Like he said, because perspective ascends quickly then tapers, an obstruction nearby would completely obscure the bottom of an object far away, and small obstructions in the foreground obstruct distant objects.
Bottom right-hand picture, I've kind of pointed to that golf ball that is 130 feet away. And so if we were to put an obstruction, let's say this blue triangle, and we were to put it in the nearby vision, let's say at 30 feet away, and I've kind of put that there on the lower right, I put the little blue triangle next to the 30-foot ball. But you can see how if I were to put that in line with the 130-foot golf ball, it would completely obscure that ball. And we can calculate that rate. So a 6 millimeter obstruction above the purple line completely obscures the entire golf ball 130 feet away. So here's some practical examples. So given a 0.4 inch observer height with a 1 arc minute of resolution, what height of an obstruction 60 feet away would obscure 0.4 inches of light at the end of a hallway 360 feet away? So it's just the same thing. Now I'm using a flashlight and an obstruction instead of a golf ball and an obstruction. And so we find that just 1.7 millimeters would block the entire light 360 feet away. Same thing here. Now if I just stand up and I'm going to extend this to a further distance, given a 6-foot observer height with 1 arc minute of resolution, how big would a wave have to be 0.25 miles away to obstruct a 250-foot tall cruise ship 20 miles away? So it's the same relationship, 250 feet of cruise ship 20 miles away versus X amount of obstruction a quarter mile away, and you would get a wave of 3 feet. So a 3-foot wave just a quarter mile away that has encroached upon that purple line already because of the rapid ascent rate will obstruct the entire boat to 20 miles away. And a 1.5-foot wave, very reasonable, especially with choppy waters, would obstruct the lower half of that boat.
Thank you, good sir. And again, alas, alas, the vast majority of the populace has no idea how crucial that information is. They'll just overlook it. It's fascinating to me. The lie is fascinating to me. As I start to uncover the methods, the methods used to perpetrate such a deception, I'm continuously fascinated because it's such an ingenious lie, but yet it's based on simple principles. Just to sum it up, they inverted the way we see the world. And they basically present a reality based off our perspective, which is not reality. Our perspective is anything but.